Jacob Zuma. Mr. President, we are taking up our seat in the United Nations Security Council. We also looking at, we're now becoming part of BRIC, Brazil, India, and China. What would you say, I mean, for the ordinary South African, what would you say are the benefits of us playing on the big international stage?
Well, firstly, if we take into account, if we take first the UN is the biggest organization of every other country, but it has other organizations that relate to it. It does have this Security Council, which then places countries a little bit above general countries, wherein final decisions are taken, critical decisions. For a country to get there, it's not a small matter. For us to come back in a short space of time, I think firstly it indicates the confidence that the world has on ANC, sorry, on the on the country South Africa. You are looking at a situation wherein people feel if South Africa is a member of the Security Council, its voice is very, very important. Important from the point of view that South Africa is one of the countries that exercises a very clear constitutional democracy. And ever since 1994, we've been very consistent in raising issues without buying the favor of anyone. That's what South Africa is all about. Sticking to principles, speaking for the poor in the world, speaking very loudly about the transformation of the institutions of the UN and other international institutions is an important struggle that we are waging as developing countries. Secondly, South Africa comes from Africa, a continent that has been left behind by the developments of the globe, which is now in the process of developing, one of the leading economic growing regions of the world. And South Africa is the biggest economy of the continent. And therefore, by us being there, you represent an important region. So from those points of views, our being there is crucial. South Africa's voice is respected, not because people love South Africans, because it is a principled country. It raises issues that need to be raised without fear of favor. That, I think, is important, and that's why even when we're voted in, we're voted with the biggest numbers. So it is important to be there. With regard to BRICS, very important that we belong to BRICS. This is a small grouping of the countries that are emerging economically, different from the old world, old countries. If you look at Brazil, it's a different country. If you look at China, India, as well as Russia, much as Russia is in Europe, is almost like an emerging, given the fact that it is now Russia, no longer the old Soviet Union. That grouping, if you talk about huge emerging economies, you cannot fail to count China, India, Brazil, and Russia. Critical. This voice, this grouping, is becoming very important. Important firstly, in the context of South-South relations. Two, in the context of developing countries. But also, in the context of the changing economic equation in the world. In no way any economist today can say the old world is going to lead forever. What is critical is that the emerging economies, by their sheer size, are in fact a major factor today. And for South Africa to belong to that grouping, again, adds a lot of value. That in the changing world, we are in the top of the groupings that have a voice that must be listened to. but also South Africa represent African region in that equation. If you look at it, if you look at BRIC, before BRICS, it was Brazil, Latin America. It was India and China, Asia, Russia, Europe. Africa was not there. So the coming in of South Africa complete the jigsaw puzzle. And it is crucial because the world is changing. And therefore South Africa must be at the leadership of shaping how the world changes today. So it is absolutely important that we are part of that grouping.
Well, in that role, we're going to play as the voice of the continent, whether it's BRIC and whether it's the United Nations, Mr. President. We've got to get our house in order. You did, of course, say yesterday that you will be monitoring the situation in Zimbabwe. You also mentioned the events in Egypt and Tunisia and so on. But as a last point, perhaps, do you think that African leaders are very much aware of the changes globally? In other words, it can no longer be business as usual. And what would you say are the lessons of those experiences for our own country?
Well, I think Africa is aware that the world is changing. At times, this is
leaders specifically, and especially presidents.
Yes. Leaders are aware. At times, in informal discussions, some leaders do say, we need to put our house in order. And I think we've been trying. The fact that today coups are not tolerated in this continent is a step forward. There is no general today that can just think, I will conduct a coup and I will be part of the AU, I will sit nicely in the continent. Not at all. They're trying to put their house in order in terms of introducing democratic practices in the continent. For an example, we are talking about many countries that are joining the peer review mechanism, who are saying, here we are, look at us from the continental point of view, whether we are doing things right, help us. In each and every summit of the AU, we discuss the peer review reports that are given by different countries. I think that is an indication of Africa realizing where we are going. Those countries that are not realizing that, they are going to be left behind. And I think some of the activities currently taking place in the continent, I think again are a lesson that you can no longer do things the old way. We've got to change. We've got to be part of the changing world. And I think there is awareness and there is a kind of a leadership that is emerging that is actually saying we can't do things the old way, including our interaction with Europe. We've begun to say it cannot be the business as usual. We've got to determine the agenda as well. We've got to find a way that we meet at equal levels. I think that is, to us, very important. We still have to do things and discuss things differently to meet even the situation I said is emerging of changing world. Africa has to take its position in a very solid fashion.
Mr. President, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for your time. Well, we've come to the end of this special broadcast brought to you by SABC News. From me, Vuyo Mvoko, and the rest of the crew. See you again next week, same time, same place.